When a vendor gets breached and your data gets leaked, whose fault is it?
Is this the blame game again? Is that what we're doing?
Well, you know what? We seem to have a theme.
I will sound like a grandpa, but when you point your finger, all the three fingers are actually pointing back to you.
We've got a world where being transparent and being fully open, it's dangerous.
90% of the case that nothing will be hidden in the cyber world. Your breach will be exposed one way or another.
Who suffers the most?
I think it always goes down to the consumer.
Greetings and salutations, one and all. Welcome to today's episode of Today's episode of Third Party, where we're going to do our version of the old game show, Whose Line It Is Anyway, except today, it's Whose Breach Is It Anyway? So, gentlemen, when a vendor gets breached and your data gets leaked, whose fault is it? Go.
Whose fault? Is this the blame game again? Is that what we're doing?
Well, you know what? We seem to have a theme.
Is it your fault because you didn't do a good enough assessment of that vendor?
Maybe.
See, that's how complicated this is when you're into the supply chain.
Yeah.
And trying to assign blame or fault is that's a scapegoat. That's what contracts are for. So liability. But if we look at it from whose fault is it, I think we're really kind of spinning on wheels. I don't know what value we get out of fault, but who should?
So I agree with you, but people still seem to play that game. They want a finger point, right? Who somebody's going to get sued, someone's going to get in trouble.
As long as it's not me, right?
Yeah, well, it ties back to when we talked about accountability, right? So what do you think, Ferhat? Whose fault is it?
Who is responsible? I can answer that. Like it's a shared responsibility thing. Whose fault it is? I don't know. Like I will sound like a grandpa. But when you point your finger, all the three fingers are actually pointing back to you, right?
Yep, that's
right. That's the finger pointing thing. So there are so many players in place, and sometimes it's nobody's fault. Sometimes
it's always somebody's fault.
Sometimes thing happens. Like I don't want to use the S word, but sometimes it happens. Instead of finding
stuff,
stuff happens, and instead of finding who is who should we blame. We should just focus on how to fix the problem, and we need to find a solution that will not repeat it again.
It's easy. It's the bad guy's fault. It's the bad actors. It's their fault. It's not the vendor's fault. There's no fault here.
But if my data gets breached, I can't sue the bad guys.
Exactly. That's why you have to blame somebody else. It's all about, financial remuneration. Who can we hold accountable? Bad guys, it's their fault, but can we actually get the money back? No.
Let's actually be a little bit more serious, because I do think this is something that we need to really kind of get out there and talk about, and at least maybe we don't have answers, but at least maybe ask some better questions. So first thing is, how transparent do you think companies should be if a breach takes place in their supply chain, whether it's digital or physical, right? They may have contracts. There may be legal exposure if they talk about things maybe that they shouldn't be talking about. So how transparent do you think they should be? I mean, one extreme we don't share anything unless we have to, and the other is we share everything even if we don't have to.
If I wear my researcher's hat, I would say that transparency helps people to solve the next problem, right? It's a case study that you can get acknowledged. We have seen similar examples, like I think it was Dragos. When Dragos got hacked, they put a very nice post-incident report that everybody got advantage of it. Anthropic, like it was, I think, 2 weeks ago or something like that. They put a very nice report about how the bad actors using AI, and we get advantage of those things. On the other hand, there are liability issues, legal issues that I cannot comment, so I cannot say that you should be full transparent. And there are things like it's a matter of critical infrastructure, it's a matter of national security. There are rules around it that you cannot disclose. You have to wait for some time before disclosing anything. So there should be a balance. We don't have to go one extreme to other extreme.
So I'm all about full transparency, and not as a researcher, but as a CISO. I think it helps everybody. But the problem with that is that where they work or who they're responsible to, that's not in the best interest of the image of the company. And the image of the company is more important. So the transparency is kept to a minimum. The age-old question when a breach happens, first question is, does anybody else know about it? And if somebody does, well, do we have to tell anybody? And that's a previous episode we talked about. I don't know what term you use, but CYA, and I think that's
Cover your tushes.
Yeah, that that's probably what's more important. And I've known CISOs that being transparent that have gotten in trouble. So they don't do it. It's just the nature of the world is that let's keep the image intact instead of actually do the right thing.
So do you think maybe we need some version of like a whistleblower regulation where the CISOs can be protected if they come out and say something in the spirit of transparency, disclosure, to Ferhat's point, to inform the community at large? Maybe they damage their company. Do you think there's a place for that? Maybe some regulation that protects them.
How does it protect them? Because if it's information,
keeps them from retaliatory firings, keeps them from getting blamed. I mean, we see it in whistleblower in financial services. If you report fraud, you're protected from retaliation, in theory.
In theory, that's the theory. But in reality, it doesn't really work that way. Those retaliatory actions, they can always be cloaked in legitimate seeming actions. So that's the challenge. Is we've got a world where being transparent and being fully open, it's dangerous. Dangerous for your career, dangerous for your future. It's in the best interest to do that for everybody. But again, we talked about it in a previous episode that humanity doesn't worry about everybody.
Collective self-interest versus personal self-interest.
Yes, I've seen that for decades, that it's been that way. And, it is difficult. It's a hard decision to make.
So who makes the decision? Is it the board? Is it the CEO and his or her direct reports? Is it the CISO's decision?
I mean, as we talked in the previous episodes, the CISO's role is to inform, right? Hey, this is what happened. There's a risk of being transparent and being non-transparent, and let the board decide, right? Otherwise, it's too much burden on CISO's shoulder.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between B2B third party or B2C third party? So in other words, if the harmed party is a company versus if the harmed party is Bob and Ferhat and Jeffrey and Kat?
I don't see much difference because a company is made up of individuals anyway, whether it's a public company, shareholders, the employees, it's, I think transparency should be the default, even though it's not. I believe it should be.
And I don't know where to draw the boundaries between what you said. There's this European company, I forgot the name, it's a fiber company. They got breached. And in the breach, the leaked data, there are information about their clients, which are businesses. But those information includes the individuals that are getting service from those clients. So it is a cascading impact that it will B2B will leak to B2C anyway.
Do you think we're going to see any class action as a result of one of these breaches? Right, all the customers whose data gets breached. But do we see an opportunity for legal to step in there and file a class action lawsuit against a company that was particularly egregious or particularly negligent?
Well, that happened to Target, right? Target got breached because of a vendor. Nobody sued the vendor. They all sued the Target.
Yeah.
Same thing happened with Equifax. So eventually you are responsible for your vendors, and blaming game will not save you if you are in a regulated industry. So we already, witnessed those things.
In answer to your question, yes, there's always going to be a class action suit because the attorneys are the ones that always make the money.
Right.
Yeah. There was just a recent class action suit with Facebook, and for selling third-party data.
A tracking pixel thing.
Yeah, and the individual Facebook users, they got a whopping
7 cents.
Yeah, no, I think it was $32 actually. It depends on how long you're a Facebook user. $32 for years of your data being sold. It probably got sold for millions and millions of dollars.
Well, my daughter reached out to me last week about some class action against a big email provider, and she said, "Should we do this?" And I went, "Yeah, you're going to get like $9 though."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Go ahead, you got nothing to lose." The reality is I have 18 different email addresses, so what 9 times 18, I might get $160.
Yeah.
To fill out 50 pages worth of forms. Do we think that needs to change? I mean, I know we're not attorneys, although I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So legally, right, we're not attorneys, so we can't determine. We think there should be some legal responsibility, but what about from an ethical or moral perspective? That companies have ethics or morals.
I always like your questions. They're so black and white.
You know what? If they were black and white, the podcast would be very short.
Yes, it would. But you go back to ethics or morals or legal responsibility. It's depends on the view of who's making the decisions. Making a decision that's in the best use of the shareholders might be the best ethical decision to make, but isn't in the best decision of the victims. So again, these are really complicated questions that that's why I just default back to my default is transparency, that we should be transparent because all types of people, individuals, businesses are affected. And if we could do that, if we could somehow get the collective mindset to think that that's the best way to go, some of the meetings between government and business would change about information sharing. We've been talking about information sharing for decades, and we still can't.
Public-private partnership.
Yeah,
but it's not proven itself to be super valuable.
Still can't figure out how to make it happen. So these are huge hurdles to overcome. But I think it's valuable to try.
Let me just get a follow-up on that. So what if you decide to be transparent, your competitors don't? That has an impact on your business.
In the short run, maybe. In the long run, no. I think those competitors that are doing things that are not above the board, that maybe are ethically or morally challenged, that they may win in the short term. But I think over the long run, people see through that. And the ones with the integrity, they live through. I remember an old quote. I have no idea where it comes from. And it's a man of integrity expects to be believed. And when he's not, he lets time prove him right. And I think companies can take that as well. The company, integrity, and over time that will show.
What color is the sky in your world, Bob? Because that's not the world that I live in.
I still believe that.
That's why we get along. Because I agree with you too. I just don't think it proves itself to be true.
Your question implies that the ethical way and the reasonable or logical way are two different. But actually, they might align if you look into the long-term perspective. So if I am a vendor, if I got breached, let's say that I decided I will not inform my clients about the breach. My clients there's a possibility that they will learn that from other channels, right? For instance, when we discover a data breach on a dark web, we inform our customers saying that your vendor got breached. And when they talk to vendors saying that, hey, you had that breach, you didn't inform me, and I will not work with you, right? That is actually more harmful than being transparent. And that is 90% of the case, this is the way. Like the 90% of the case, that nothing will be hidden in the cyber world. Your breach will be exposed one way or another. Mm-hmm. It's better to come out.
Sometimes the bad actors are the ones.
Yes, exactly.
We saw a couple of cases right after the SEC ruling where the bad actors were actually reporting to the SEC.
The SEC, yeah.
But so I love it when this happens. You actually gave me a leading question because my next question was, do you guys believe that companies like Black Kite have a moral and ethical responsibility to share that information? We know. Should we be going out and saying, we saw this and here's who's involved? Or do you think that's overstepping what we do?
Not really. That's our responsibility. We have to report what we see, right? That's why our customers, purchase our solution. we have to report whatever we see. And sometimes we report a leak credential. Then the vendor says, oh, we already changed our passwords or something like that. They said that. Sure, but I have to report what I see. If you think that you remediated that risk, just flag that you remediated that risk. That's fine. Don't ask me to delete that finding, because if it's a valid finding that I've seen on dark web and I'm reporting that, that's my responsibility.
Let's talk a little bit about sort of the shift in that, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, supply chains, whether they were physical or digital, were far less complex than they are now. We have plenty of examples where we talk about, fifth, sixth party breaches. Like the one that I use as an example is a breach from about 4 years ago, a company called 7 Rooms. They're a CRM for hospitality. Actually, no, not about 5 years ago. So they got breached. And a bunch of, if you stayed in an MGM property or ate in one of Gordon Ramsay's restaurants, your data was in that breach. They didn't actually get breached, though. They had a third-party data transfer agent that did get breached. And I did some research, and I could not even find the name of that third-party data transfer agent. So that's potentially a fifth-party breach, right? I go in and I stay in a hotel. I give you my information, blah, 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 right? So I think that's more complicated than what we've seen in the past. So do you see, you pointed, right? Well, it's their fault, right? Like, let's talk about the Snowflake breach, for example. Snowflake didn't get breached, right? The problem was people deployed the software in a poor way. They didn't put MFA.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Snowflake's fault? No, they told you deploy MFA and people chose not to for whatever reason. So how do you sort of, who you point the finger at then? Then there's no one big sort of, no deep pocket there.
It's easier to point one company than all the companies, they have the poor practices. The Snowflake is a good example of that, right? And in this digital connected world, the supply chain impact, the cascading impact is huge. We have seen that with CrowdStrike outage, the Cloudflare outage, and every other month, I think we have some sort of an outage that will impact the daily lives of people, right? It is quite difficult, but sometimes there's a straightforward path that you see the culprit, right? There was an incident, I think it was 4 years ago. Most of the major banks, they sold some debts to a debt collector. The debt collector, when they received the papers, they are all handwritten, some of them, not all. So they send these handwritten documents to an OCR company, optical character recognition company. That OCR company got breached. And all those banks, they had to inform all these guys on the personal information and say that, hey, your information got breached, because they are heavily regulated industry, right? But whose fault is it? That one employee in the OCR company.
That's a really interesting one, though, because that's a back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Because it goes from the bank to the debt collector to the OCR and then back to the banks.
Yeah.
It's, again, call your lawyers, because we are not. But so let's kind of close with one last question. When we run into these challenges with finger pointing and nobody wants to take responsibility, nobody wants to be accountable, nobody wants to get sued or have to pay fines or whatever, who gets hurt the most? Is it the company in the middle? Is it the consumer, the consumer of the product or service, whether that's a person or a company? Are boards, or, the CEO or his or her direct report, like who? It just seems like there's a lot of suffering all around.
Yeah. I mean, everybody gets hurt except the attorneys, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that
We love attorneys. Don't sue us.
I don't second that sentence.
Sue him then, not me.
But the point is that if we keep playing that blaming game, nobody will get advantage of it. Like nobody will benefit from that incident. There are benefits after the incidents when you are transparent, you learn something, you started to learn sharing the responsibilities. All these third-party related breaches, there's a lack of shared responsibility. There's a lack of communication. We were talking about the CISOs responsibilities. We were talking about they should get, some business classes maybe to learn the businesses. they should also learn effective communication, because third-party risk management is all about effective communication. There is
And
no other way.
collaboration. Yeah. I do a lot of interviews where people say, what's the biggest challenge to CISOs? And my answer is never one they expect. It's always about poor communication. So what do you think, Bob? Who suffers the most?
I think it always goes down to the consumer, the person at the bottom of the chain, because it's all going to get passed down to that person eventually, financially somehow. And to your point, I think in a perfect world, if instead of the finger pointing, that it was a collaborative sharing, that it is complicated, and with the supply chain, with AI, with the internet, it's more complicated than it's ever been. And if we spend that time finger pointing, we don't have the time to learn any lessons. And it's the lessons learned that can make it better for the next time that it doesn't happen.
Right. It's, I've shared this before. My parents got hit by scammers a couple of times last year. And, thankfully we were able to get all the money back. But, I asked some people who I trust and sort of sit high up, like, the banks, I think, need to take a little bit of ownership over the fact that they're allowing this stuff to happen and that they do a terrible job. And I'm obviously not going to point a finger at any one bank. But I mean, I spoke to one guy and I said, so, okay, you won't tell me your last name. You won't tell me your boss's name. You won't give me your email address. You won't give me your direct phone number. You won't tell me who's running the investigation. So you're basically useless. And he said, yes. Right.
Self-aware. Great person to know.
But that didn't help. And I always say, if I didn't have the expertise I had and my wife was not the most tenacious person on the planet, my parents weren't getting their money back. I mean, I laid it out to the guy. I said, so let me tell you a story. You guys wired money to a bank that got fined $300 million for fraud last year into an account that was set up 24 hours before for a corporation that was incorporated 2 days before. The money was taken out in 17 seconds. The account was never touched since. Does that sound like fraud to you? And the guy said, well, yeah. I said, so why don't you give my parents their money back and then you go figure it out, which is what ended up happening. But I asked these people at this conference, like, when do we hold these corporations accountable? And the answer is nobody really knows. And I think they do some things, and I think they're getting better. But I think ultimately they allowed this to happen. And
that's a risk they accept. Like, they don't.
Right. But if I didn't have my expertise and piece together that scenario and be able to track down the wire order and be able to understand that SIM swapping is pretty trivial, I'm not having that conversation. And my parents are not getting their money back.
But that's another risk the bank accepts, that there's more people out there not like you than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, when do they get held accountable? Yeah. And I don't think that's not to hit on the banks. I just think it's a sort of specific example of this kind of accountability. And I think we talked about it in a previous episode. Can we rely on the regulators? And I don't know that we can really do that. So I think really that's where I think companies like ours and groups like CRA and CSA and all these sort of industry groups that and shared assessments, I think we all need to kind of band together and figure out, like, how do we build this model of accountability? How do we figure out, how do we have a repository for all this data to be dumped so that an independent maybe can go back and look and, without pointing fingers at a particular bank or a particular vendor, say, in this chain, here's where the accountability lies. I mean, do you see any other sort of solutions?
Well, wherever you're going to dump all that data, I don't want to be the CISO protecting it.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the problem, right? Is where does that data go? Because then that becomes a big, giant target.
Definitely.
So this is now the third episode in a row we laid out a whole bunch of problems and not really a lot of solutions. I do think we need to, again, it comes back to what we talked about last episode, which is we need to move away from the blame game, and we need to figure out how to actually address these problems, how to make people whole, how to make companies whole. There are companies that essentially get put out of business by these incidents, and nobody's really paying enough attention. So, all right. So that was not a high note to leave this on. So, but I think we really need to go out to the industry groups and I think all the vendors, and I think this is an opportunity. I'm going to call our competitors out, right? We can talk to them about these common problems without taking business from each other. And I think we need to do that. And I don't think they're willing to do that. I've reached out to peers in other companies and they won't talk to us. And that's very, very frustrating. We have a global problem that we need to really look at, and people are not willing to collaborate. And we've talked about that a bunch of times. All right. So thank you for joining us. And again, please feel free to comment. If you have any solutions, any answers, we would love to hear them.
You can't manage what you can't see, and most vendor cyber risk tools leave you guessing. Black Kite gives you complete visibility into your vendor ecosystem, from technical gaps to ransomware susceptibility, compliance posture, and even financial health. Get the full picture at blackkite.com. That's blackkite.com.
So now we come to our research roundup. So today, gentlemen, our research report came from the World Economic Forum, and they say 54% of large organizations say that supply chain is the number one barrier to cyber resilience. So I think this is an interesting one. Yet again, though, we're coming back to the definition of resilience, another definition. And I had this conversation with our COO, Chris Bush, when I first started. We should focus on resilience. And he said, define it, right? So I'll give you my definition of resilience. How do we keep a minimum viable level of business no matter what happens? Very simple, right? So what do we do about the fact that supply chain is deemed by more than half of large organizations to see this? And, we talked about predictions a couple episodes ago. One of the predictions we put out, which I'll put my name to it since that way if it's wrong, I think we're going to see 8-figure loss this year in an organization due to a supply chain incident. So do you see this problem getting worse? Is it a digital problem? Is it a physical problem?
Yes.
Okay, Ferhat?
Yeah, I'm channeling my former time when I played an attorney. So yeah,
yes, it is. That's right. Yes or no?
Yes,
Sorry, don't remember.
Depends.
So it's definitely getting worse, right? We've seen more and more examples, and exactly. the one that I've been talking about is KNP Logistics from a couple years ago, right? They were, and war is the key word. They were a British logistics company, 154 years old. 2 years ago, they got hit with ransomware because of a bad password. Otherwise, their program was good. They were in receivership in 45 days. They were out of business in 90. They had hundreds of employees that all lost their jobs. And you go, well, that stinks for them. But you know who it really stinks for? Anybody waiting for raw material to show up. Anybody waiting for a truck to pick product up. And I shared that story in our customer advisory board. And one of our customers, who I will not name, put their hand up and said, yeah, that cost us $5 million, right? This is the real world. Right? We talked about JLR had a provable impact on the GDP for one of the largest economies in the world. So definitely getting worse. Do we see it getting worse before it gets better? Do you think we have any? Don't laugh, Bob. Do you think we have anything sort of in play? I feel like we're going to have another depressing episode today.
Yeah, we are.
I can give you the threat actors perspective on that one. So I will classify them into two groups. One is the ransomware groups. The other one is the APTs, nation-sponsored threat actors. For ransomware groups, they are mostly unintentionally disrupting the supply chain because we analyze, thousands of victims. We looked into their annual revenue. Large portion of the victims, they have an annual revenue below $20 million, which means that they are SMBs, small and medium businesses, right? And they are mostly in part of the supply chain. And today's world, it is so connected to each other. When you remove one piece, it disrupts the whole the whole industry. We have seen that in the automotive industry. There was this company, CDK Global. They were providing a solution, IT solution to dealerships. When they went on, I think it was 30,000 dealership, they couldn't provide services. They couldn't sell a car for 2 days. It's a huge thing. We have seen the same thing with Change Healthcare in the healthcare industry. So there are always these, industry-specific incidents that we don't hear much unless it impacts our daily lives. And these small and medium business companies, they got attacked by these ransomware groups because there are so many new players, the small players, and they want quick money, and it's easy to attack these SMBs. On the other side, APT groups, they know the supply chain very well. They intentionally doing the supply chain attacks because they know that some big major targets of theirs, they have a mature cybersecurity program. It is very costly to attack them. So they go through the supply chain. I don't want to sound depressive. It's more like the observation. It's going worse on the supply chain side. We are going to see more and more supply chain attacks in the upcoming years.
Yes, and the reason I chuckled when you said at the beginning was that complexity is the enemy of security, and supply chain is obviously becoming more complex because we're more dependent upon that interconnectivity, the exclusive use. Everything gets outsourced these days. 30 years ago, a server farm, you could walk out the door and down the hallway and go through, badge your way into the server farm, and all your assets were there in front of you. And we don't live in that world anymore, and it's so distributed and so complex. So it's challenging to keep that secure. And then you tie that into with what Ferhat said. The bad guys know that. They're not looking for the. You specifically said the large companies that are costly to attack. They don't go after them, and there's a reason. They have a good business model. Their business model is what's the most effective use of our resources.
Right. It's the magnifier, the expander, the sort of bottom of the funnel. So moving out.
So that's why it's only going to get worse. There's ways we can change our thinking about that. And in third party, that is one of our biggest challenges.
Well, the good thing, though, is we're definitely starting to see people, like we're seeing a lot of traction in manufacturing, shipping, logistics, wholesale, retail, really industries that they're not digital businesses, but they're starting to ask questions. So it's good that people are starting to ask questions.
Well, it is, but then the problem we have, and I've spoken about this, is I think third party risk management today is broken. It's a very static process. It's based on best practices that have been established over the last 25 or 30 years. And those best practices, they don't really change other than let's put AI on top of it and make a bad practice go faster. And so, it's how we think about the agility of third party risk management, how we can become more effective in that complex world of identifying where those problems are going to be. I run our third-party risk management program. I just happen to use the Black Eye platform, and one of the things I love about
one would hope so.
Yes, one of the things I love about that is when bad things happen. Like not so long ago, AWS had an outage. So my option was, do we wait to see which one of our vendor services break? To see who's affected, because it didn't just all of a sudden one day they all went off.
Right.
It was a cascading problem. So we were able to get ahead of that because we were able to dive down into our vendor ecosystem to see who are in our chain where dependent vendors were dependent upon Amazon Web Services. And so we were prepared. Oh, here's a possibility. And as it developed, we knew, okay, if that does fail 3 levels down, that comes back to one of our critical vendors, we were prepared. So it's having that ability to
right.
be
So that
proactive.
we talk about that, the informing piece.
Yes.
Yeah. So I always like to share this. I have a friend of mine who was the CISO for a manufacturing company, and she said, look, we manufacture product in 6 different factories in China. Every factory uses 4 different trucking companies. They go to 6 different ports. They use 14 different shipping lines. They land in 5 ports in the U.S. They go on different trucks. What can I do? And I said, well, what you can do is you can go and you can look at the cyber posture of all of those vendors and go to your supplier and say, I'll tell you what, if you stop using company A, B, D, X, and Q, we'll give you an extra 1/4 point, right? So what we've now done is we've created a collaborative environment. We'll save you money on product, but we'll pay you more. And you've now eliminated some risk from our supply chain. And I think that's a really useful way. And that was a very complicated example, but I think we need to start figuring that out, right?
Yes.
Look where our biggest exposure is in the supply chain. Do we have alternatives? Can we make it financially responsible. And all the suppliers said for a quarter of a point, millions of dollars, absolutely we'll stop using those.
Be agile and be proactive.
Right.
But to be able to do that, you need to have the visibility, right? If you don't have that visibility into that complex environment, it's very difficult to do so. Sometimes you don't even know that you cannot get the stuff that you need because of a cyber attack.
Right.
Let me give you an example. I think it was probably 3 years ago or 5 years ago. A drug cartel reached out to a ransomware group saying that, hey, I need to sneak in some drugs into this port. Can you execute an attack to that port? They executed an attack to that port. That port couldn't use their computers and systems for, I think, 3-4 days. Throughout that day, that the drug cartel, I am guessing that they were able to, put some drugs into the system. But because of that incident, some materials couldn't get into the trucks. And because of that, some manufacturing couldn't manufacture that they need to manufacture. And you need that stuff from the manufacturer. You only have connection to the manufacturer, right? You're saying that, hey, I cannot get that. And they said that, because the truck company couldn't provide that. If you follow that path, you might end up, finding the root cause. But you cannot be prepared for that if you don't have the visibility.
Yeah. Right. Well, we saw the port of Migoyo a bunch of years ago caused all kinds of cascading impact. DP Global, which is a shipping and logistics company that runs software that moves containers in and out of ports. And the entire shipping in and out of Australia went down for a weekend at the beginning of December. Well, what happens at the end of December, right? Just think about that. And I wonder if that's the same story. We should compare notes.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, the complexity, and while we do a great job helping people illuminate their supply chain, even in the best case scenario, there's stuff that gets missed by anybody.
Yeah.
And even the pure supply chain management companies, they don't see everything. And to your point, these things are super complicated. So, all right.
Since you are learning something new, drop us a quick rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps more people find the show and tells us that you want more.
So now we move on to what is quickly becoming my favorite part of each episode, agree or disagree. Again, just to refresh, so I'm going to read a statement. Bob and Ferhat and I are going to give thumbs up, thumbs down, or increasingly thumbs sideways, much to the chagrin of our producers. And then we'll discuss it. So first one, and we've actually talked about this, but I like this. So public disclosure should always name the vendor. Naming and shaming vendors works. In other words, management by embarrassment. So I think we can lump this together. So let me read again. Public disclosure should always name the vendor. Naming and shaming vendors works.
So, yeah, for the first part of your statement, yes.
Yeah. That's
Okay. The naming and shaming, again, now we've gone back to, in our statement, we're finger pointing. Okay. I don't think there's any finger pointing involved. Now, identification, that's full disclosure, yes. But attaching, naming and shaming to it,
So you're saying we should name the vendors but not give them a thumbs down and not make a pouty face?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that.
I mean, we can talk to vendor and make it, a public announcement together.
Yeah.
Right?
Give the vendor the opportunity first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So similar to like vulnerability disclosure, right? Sending in code reports, and then if they don't respond, okay, I could agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah. But I do think that there should be a requirement for public disclosure.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And I think that is definitely not happening in a lot of cases. I think there's some regulatory stuff out there that's becoming more and more. I think in particular, DORA in financial services in the EU, I think is a pretty good example of that. It's still pretty young and we haven't really seen, I think they're running into some logistical challenges, but that is the future. All right. Number 2, I love this one. Cyber insurance has made people careless.
I will disagree with that.
You disagree. All right.
People were careless before the same.
All right. So let me rephrase it.
I'm gonna change.
So let me rephrase it to maybe. So I think what we're trying to get at there is that people think they can get away with doing less because the insurance company will just pay.
So the over-reliance on insurance, yes, I disagree with that. But we shouldn't do that.
I'm still waffling on this because, over reliance on it. Yes. Are some people going to do that? Yes. But cyber insurance is a legitimate option. Risk transference.
Yes.
That's what the
Right,
purpose
but
of
does
cyber
it give
insurance.
you the excuse to not hit the standard of due care?
It can. Are you going to take that excuse? Again, it comes down to that individual accountability, the morality, and the ethics of the people that are making those decisions. So to say that everybody's taking advantage of it, that's I think that might be insurance fraud.
So too broad strokey, you think?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because we do know, and we've seen, and this is not an uncommon thing in insurance, you say you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8B. We insured you, and it turns out you actually got drunk and drove your car. We're not paying if you had an accident.
And that's a fair and reasonable
All right, so there's
response.
some balance there.
Yeah.
We've definitely seen a lot of maturity in that industry too. We talk to a lot of folks in that space. I think we're getting some standardization. I don't know if we're ever going to get 100%, but I think across the board, the insurance companies kind of know what it is they should be looking for. All right, and then the last one, and I think we beat this one already into a pulp. The customer owns ultimate responsibility. And I'm going to go sideways on this.
I will, because it says ultimate. So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here, but I think customer, I'm seeing it in two ways. Customer can be a company and customer can be a person. If it's an end user like me and Ferhat and Bob, then I don't think there's any responsibility. I bank with the bank. I should not be responsible if they suck, right? But I think if the company is the customer, I think there is some shared responsibility there. I don't know why I keep having my thumb out sideways here. But I do think that you should have accountability about what your vendors and partners are doing. And I think sometimes there as well, they signed a contract. It's their responsibility. And I don't think that floats.
I still believe in the shared responsibility. That's why I said it's ultimate responsibility. I disagree with this point. But if you put a shared responsibility clause over there, I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that has been today's installation, implementation.
One of the
version,
above.
Yeah. Of agree or disagree. And again, please give us some things below. If you don't agree with us, we love that. We love to have people tell us, no, we're wrong. I actually thrive on it because it helps me think through my thought process, and my colleagues feel the same way. So definitely let us know what you think, especially if you love it.
Thumbs up to that.
Next week, we're closing the loop with a deceptively simple question. What actually puts the C in TPCRM? Because if it's not cyber, then what are we even measuring? Remember, cybersecurity doesn't thrive in the shadows. It demands daylight. Until next time.